Commander Zixthek stood on the bridge of his massive warship, the Void Render. The ship was 3 miles long and packed with the most advanced weapons in the galaxy. Through the wide viewing screen, he could see the stars stretching out before him like tiny diamonds against black cloth. Each star represented another victory for the Kethron Empire. Not the bridge was quiet, except for the soft hum of computers and the occasional beep from control panels. Zixthak's 4 arms moved across different screens as he studied the latest intelligence reports. His pale blue skin had dark markings that showed his rank as a fleet commander. His large black eyes could see details that would escape most species. And right now they were focused on a small section of space near the edge of the galaxy. "Commander," said his second officer, Kethvar, approaching with a datapad in his clawed hands. "The intelligence division has completed their analysis of the new species." Zixthek took the pad and scrolled through the information. The species called themselves humans, and they came from a small blue and green planet they called Earth. The report showed that humans had only developed faster than light travel in the past 50 years. Their technology was primitive compared to Kethron standards. Their weapons were basic plasma cannons and simple missiles. Their ships looked like they had been built from scrap metal and hope. "How many ships do they have?" Zixthek asked. "Intelligence estimates no more than 200 vessels across all their colonies," Kethvar replied. "Most are cargo ships converted for military use. They have perhaps 30 actual warships." Zixthek's mouth formed what might have been a smile on his alien face. In his long military career, he had conquered 47 star systems. The Kethron Empire had not lost a single war in over 300 years. Their military machine was perfect, built on mathematical precision and overwhelming force. Every battle was calculated down to the smallest detail. Victory was always certain before the first shot was fired. "What about their military doctrine?" Zixthak asked as he walked to the main tactical display. A 3-dimensional map of human space appeared, showing their 12 colony worlds connected by thin shipping lanes. "That is where it gets interesting, Commander," Kethvar said, his voice carrying a note of confusion. "Their military strategies appear to be completely random. They have no standard formations, no unified command structure, and their tactics change from engagement to engagement. Our computers cannot find any logical pattern in their approach to warfare." Zixthak studied the map more carefully. The human colonies were spread out across a relatively small area of space, maybe 20 light years at the furthest points. Their worlds were poorly defended, with only small orbital platforms and a few patrol ships. It would be like crushing insects under his boot. "Perhaps they are simply too primitive to understand proper military science," Zixthak mused. "How long since they discovered fire?" "Approximately 1 million years, Commander. And they still fight like animals, no doubt." Zixthek turned away from the display and walked to his command chair. The chair was made from a rare metal that could withstand the pressure of deep space and the heat of stellar cores. It was a symbol of Kethron power and technological superiority. The communication officer's station chimed with an incoming message. "Commander, we are receiving a transmission from the human fleet. It appears to be from their military leader." "Put it on screen," Zixthek ordered. The viewing screen flickered and then showed the face of a human male. He had brown hair that was cut short and blue eyes that seemed to hold a strange intensity. His skin was darker than Kethron's skin, and he wore a simple military uniform with small metal insignia on his chest. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Force vessel Phoenix," the human said. His voice was calm but firm. "You have entered human space without permission. State your intentions." Zixthek almost laughed. The human ship called Phoenix was barely 1/10 the size of the Void Render. It was like a small fish challenging a whale. But protocol demanded proper procedure, even when dealing with such primitive species. "I am Commander Zixthak of the Catherine Imperial Fleet," he replied. "You will surrender immediately and submit to Imperial authority. Your species will be relocated to designated areas where you can serve the Empire in whatever capacity we deem appropriate." The human captain's expression did not change. "That's not going to happen, Commander. I suggest you turn your ships around and leave our space. This is your only warning." Now Zixthak did laugh, a sound like grinding metal. "You have 30 ships, human. I have 200. Your technology is centuries behind ours. Your weapons cannot penetrate our shields. Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick." Captain Morrison leaned forward slightly. "You know, Commander, I've been in the military for 20 years. I've fought pirates, raiders, and rebels. I've seen ships explode and good people die. But I've never met anyone who was so sure they were going to win before the fighting even started." "Because victory is certain," Zixthak replied. "Mathematics does not lie. Superior numbers plus superior technology equals victory. This is not opinion. This is fact." The human captain was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that would stick in Zixthak's mind for the rest of his life. "You know what, Commander? You might be right about the math. But you're wrong about one thing. You think this is about ships and weapons and technology. For us, this is about our homes, our families, our freedom. And that changes everything." The transmission ended, leaving Zixthak staring at a blank screen. He turned to his tactical officer. "How long until we reach their first colony?" 18 hours, Commander." "Excellent. We will demonstrate to these humans the price of defying the Catherine Empire. Prepare the fleet for assault formation. This will be over quickly." But as Zixthak settled back in his command chair, he found himself thinking about the human captain's words. In all his years of conquest, no enemy had ever spoken to him that way. Most species begged for mercy or tried to negotiate. Some fought bravely but accepted defeat when it became clear they could not win. Something about the human's tone bothered him. It was not the voice of someone who was afraid or desperate. It was the voice of someone who had already accepted what was coming and was ready to face it head on. Zixthak pushed the thought away. Humans were just another primitive species that would learn to bow before Kethron might. In 18 hours, their first colony would fall, and the rest would quickly follow. The mathematics were clear, and mathematics never lied. Around him, the bridge crew prepared for battle with the smooth efficiency that had won them 47 star systems. Weapons were charged, shields were raised, and course corrections were made. Everything was proceeding according to plan. But in the back of his mind, Zixthak could not shake the feeling that he was missing something important about these humans. Something that might change everything. The first battle began at 0800 hours in the mining colony of New Austin. Admiral Lisa Rodriguez stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Defiant, watching as 37 human ships formed what looked like a defensive line. She had been fighting space pirates for 15 years, but this was different. These were not raiders looking for easy targets. These were professional soldiers from an empire that had never lost a war. "Admiral, enemy fleet approaching from Sector 7, reported her communications officer, Lieutenant Danny Kim. 200 ships, just like intelligence said. Lisa nodded and activated the fleet-wide communication system. "All ships, this is Admiral Rodriguez. Remember what we talked about in the briefing. We are not here to win some glorious victory. We are here to make them pay for every inch of space they take. Make them remember that humans do not go quietly." The Catherine fleet moved with perfect precision. Their ships formed geometric patterns that looked like they had been drawn by a computer. Every vessel was in exactly the right position, Every weapon angle was calculated for maximum effectiveness. It was beautiful in its mechanical perfection. Commander Zix watched the human formation through his tactical display. The human ships were scattered across a much wider area than proper military doctrine suggested. Some were hiding behind asteroids, others were positioned near the colony's orbital platforms, and a few seemed to be moving in completely random directions. "Their formation makes no sense," reported his tactical officer. "They have divided their forces into 7 separate groups, with no apparent coordination between them." "It does not matter," Zix replied. "Begin the assault. Target their largest. Ships first." The Kethran fleet opened fire with devastating precision. Beams of energy that could melt through solid rock reached out across space toward the human ships. But as the weapons fired, something unexpected happened. The human ships broke formation completely. Instead of maintaining their positions and returning fire in an organized manner, the human vessels scattered like startled birds. They moved in directions that made no tactical sense, some diving toward the planet's surface while others climbed up and over the Kethran formation. "What are they doing?" Kethvar asked, staring at the tactical display in confusion. Before Zix could answer, the human ships began their own attack. But instead of focusing fire on the largest Kethran vessels, they targeted completely different systems. Some aimed for shield generators, others went after weapon systems, and a few focused on communication arrays. Lieutenant Ben Carter flew his fighter craft, the Hornet, directly into the teeth of the Kethran formation. His ship was tiny compared to the massive alien vessels, but he had loaded it with every explosive device he could find. The tactical computers on every Kethran ship marked his fighter as a low-priority target. One small ship could not possibly threaten a mile-long dreadnought. Ben proved them wrong. He flew his ship directly at the shield generator of the Kethran heavy cruiser Dominator. The alien point defense systems tried to shoot him down, but Ben had been flying since he was 16 years old. He knew every trick in the book, and a few that were not in any book dot at the last second. Ben ejected from his fighter and watched as the small ship, now packed with explosives, slammed into the shield generator. The explosion was not large enough to destroy the cruiser, but it knocked out the shields on the entire port side of the ship. "Now!" Admiral Rodriguez shouted over the communication system. 3 human destroyers that had been hiding behind a large asteroid came screaming out of cover. They focused all their firepower on the now unshielded section of the Dominator. The heavy cruiser's armor was thick, but human plasma cannons were designed to cut through asteroid rock, and they did their job well. The Dominator listed to 1. Sighed as atmosphere vented from multiple hull breaches. It was not destroyed, but it was badly damaged and had to withdraw from the battle. "Impossible," Zix muttered. That ship had perfect defensive positioning, but the humans were not done. Captain Maria Santos, commanding the destroyer Wolverine, had positioned her ship near the colony's main orbital platform. As the Kethran fleet moved to attack the platform, she activated a surprise the humans had prepared. The orbital platform was actually a disguised weapons system. Hidden inside what looked like a simple mining facility were missile launchers that had been built using parts from decommissioned warships. When Captain Santos gave the signal, 200 missiles launched simultaneously. The Kethran fleet's defensive systems were designed to handle coordinated attacks from enemy warships. They were not prepared for a massive missile swarm launched from what their sensors had identified as a civilian target. 12 Kethran ships took damage from the missile attack. None were destroyed, but their perfect formation was disrupted as captains maneuvered to avoid the unexpected assault. "Reform the battle line," Zix ordered. "Focus fire on that platform." But even as he gave the order, more human ships were attacking from new directions. Colonel Amy Brooks, commanding a squadron of converted cargo ships, had been waiting. Behind the colony's moon, her ships were not fast or heavily armed, but they had been modified in ways that no Kethron tactical computer could predict. The cargo ships had been fitted with ramming prows made from asteroid mining equipment. They were essentially flying battering rams, and Colonel Brooks aimed them directly at the Kethron supply ships in the rear of the formation. "Commander," reported the tactical officer, "enemy vessels are attempting ramming attacks on our supply line." Zixthak stared at the display in disbelief. "They are using cargo ships as weapons?" "Yes, sir. They appear to have reinforced the forward sections and loaded them with explosives." 3 of the ramming ships were destroyed by Kethron defensive fire, but 2 made it through. They slammed into Kethron supply vessels with tremendous force, destroying both the cargo ships and their targets. The battle continued for 3 hours. The humans lost 21 ships, while the Kethrons lost only 7. By any mathematical calculation, the Kethrons had won a decisive victory. But Zixthak did not feel like a victor. "Casualty report," he ordered. 43 ships damaged, 7 destroyed, 15,000 casualties, Kethva reported. The humans lost 21 ships with approximately 4,000 crew members. Zixthak studied the numbers. The mathematics said he had won, but the cost was much higher than any computer had predicted. More importantly, the humans had shown capabilities that made no sense according to proper military doctrine. "Sir," reported the communications officer, "we are receiving a transmission from the human colony." The screen showed Captain Morrison again, but now he was on the surface of New Austin. Behind him, civilians were loading vehicles with supplies and equipment. "Well, Commander," Captain Morrison said, "you won your first battle. Congratulations. But I want you to know something. We are not leaving this planet. We are just getting started." The transmission ended, and Zixthak found himself staring at the colony below. His instruments showed human activity all across the planet's surface, but he could not determine what they were doing. "Commander," Kethver said quietly, "perhaps we should request reinforcements before we proceed to the next system." For the first time in his career, Zixthak was not sure that superior numbers and technology would be enough. The humans had lost the battle, but they had made the Kethrons pay a price that no computer had calculated. And somehow, Zixthak knew that the real war was just beginning. 2 weeks after the battle at New Austin, Commander Zixthak was beginning to understand that he had made a terrible mistake. The humans had not simply retreated from their colony. They had turned the entire planet into a weapon, the Kethron occupation. Force on New Austin sent daily reports that made no sense. Human civilians were attacking supply convoys with homemade bombs. Children were leaving booby traps in abandoned buildings. Even the elderly were participating in resistance activities that disrupted Kethron operations. "Sir," reported Major Vextar, the commanding officer of the ground forces, "we have lost another transport today." The humans used a farming vehicle, loaded with explosives, to attack our supply depot. Zixthak studied the report on his screen. The attack had been carried out by a human farmer named Joe Parker, who had driven his grain harvester directly into a Kethron ammunition storage facility. The explosion had destroyed enough supplies to support 1,000 soldiers for a month. "A farmer," Zixthak said quietly. "A civilian farmer attacked a military target." "Yes, sir. Intelligence indicates that the human civilian population is fully integrated into their military resistance. We cannot distinguish between combatants and non-combatants." This was something that had never happened in any of the Kethron Empire's previous conquests. Usually, civilian populations surrendered quickly once their military was defeated. They understood that cooperation meant survival, while resistance meant death. But the humans seemed to operate by different rules. They did not surrender when logic said they should. They did not accept defeat when mathematics proved they could not win. They fought with a desperation that made no tactical sense. Captain Danny Kim had been captured during the battle at New Austin, but he had escaped from the Catherine prisoner facility using methods that still baffled his captors. Instead of trying to reach safety, he had spent the past week organizing other escaped prisoners into a fighting force that was causing havoc behind enemy lines. "Sir," reported the intelligence officer, "we have intercepted another human transmission. It appears to be from their escaped prisoner leader." The screen showed Captain Kim standing in what looked like a cave. His uniform was torn and dirty, and he had a bandage wrapped around his left arm. Behind him, Zixthak could see other humans, both military and civilian, working together to prepare weapons and supplies. "This is Captain Kim to all resistance cells," Kim said. "Operation Hornet's Nest is a go. Remember, we are not trying to win battles. We are trying to make them pay for every day they stay on our worlds." The transmission ended, but within hours, the results were clear. Coordinated attacks struck Kethron positions across the planet. None of the attacks were large enough to cause serious damage, but together they created a constant drain on Kethron resources and morale. Meanwhile, in the asteroid belt between New Austin and the next human colony, Sergeant Maria Santos was proving that humans could adapt to any environment. She had taken command of a mining facility that the Kethrons had written off as unimportant. But Santos had turned the asteroid into a fortress using nothing but mining equipment and human determination. "Commander," reported the tactical officer, "we are receiving fire from the asteroid belt. It appears to be coming from mining facility designation Alpha 7. Zixthak looked at the tactical display. The asteroid was barely a mile across, with no military installations and no strategic value. "What kind of fire?" "Mining laser arrays, sir. They have been modified to function as weapons. The facility is also launching mining charges modified as missiles." Zixthak ordered a squadron of fighters to destroy the asteroid facility. It should have been a simple operation. The asteroid had no shields, no proper weapons, and no military defenses. But Sergeant Santos had spent years working in asteroid mining operations. She knew every trick for moving through zero gravity, every method for using industrial equipment as weapons, and every way to make a small space into a death trap for attackers. The Kethran fighters approached the asteroid and found themselves flying through a maze of cables, debris, and mining equipment that Santos had arranged like a three-dimensional minefield. The fighters that made it through the obstacles found themselves facing mining lasers that could cut through solid rock. Fighters were destroyed, and 2 more were damaged before the squadron commander ordered a retreat. The small mining facility had successfully defended itself against a professional military attack. "How?" Zixthak asked. "How is one human female holding an entire asteroid against our forces?" Dr. Helen Pierce was asking herself similar questions, but from a different perspective. She had been a xenobiologist before the war, studying alien life forms for peaceful purposes. Now she was studying Kethran, technology for military applications. The humans had captured several pieces of Kethran equipment during the battle at New Austin. While Kethran engineers had spent centuries perfecting their technology, they had also made it predictable. Every system followed the same basic principles, used the same power sources, and operated according to the same mathematical formulas. Dr. Pierce discovered that human creativity could find weaknesses in Kethran perfection. Their weapons were incredibly powerful, but they had built-in safety systems that could be exploited. Their computers were amazingly fast, but they could not process truly random data. "Look at this," Dr. Pierce said to her assistant, a young engineer named Alex Chun. "The Kethran plasma rifle has 17 different safety protocols. But if you override just 3 of them, the weapon becomes twice as powerful and half as stable." "That sounds dangerous," Alex replied. "It is dangerous, But dangerous is exactly what we need right now. Working together, Dr. Pierce and Alex began reverse engineering Kethran technology. They did not try to copy it exactly. Instead, they took Kethran principles and applied them in ways that no Kethran engineer would ever consider. The result was a new generation of human weapons that were crude, unreliable, and absolutely deadly. They broke down frequently, required constant maintenance, and sometimes exploded when used incorrectly. But they could punch through Kethran armor, and shields. Major Chris Thompson received the first batch of these new weapons at his resistance camp on New Austin. His unit consisted of 23 soldiers and 47 civilians who had refused to evacuate when the Kethrans landed. "Are you sure these things work?" asked Linda Hayes, a school teacher who had become one of Thompson's most effective fighters. "Dr. Pierce says they work," Thompson replied. "The question is whether they work long enough to get the job done." That night, Thompson's unit attacked a Kethran supply convoy using the new weapons. The modified plasma rifles cut through Kethran vehicle, armor like paper. The improvised explosives created chaos in the convoy formation, and the human fighters disappeared into the darkness before reinforcements could arrive. Commander Zix Thak received the report of the convoy attack while reviewing casualty reports from across the occupation zone. The numbers were becoming impossible to ignore. The Kethran Empire was losing more personnel and equipment every day, despite having complete control of the planet. "Sir," Kethver said, "perhaps we should consider requesting additional reinforcements." Zix Thak looked at the tactical display showing human resistance activities across New Austin. Red dots marked locations where attacks had occurred in just the past day. There were over 200 red dots. How many reinforcements would we need? Zix Thak asked. Intelligence estimates at least 50,000 additional troops to maintain control of this one planet. 50,000 troops to control a world that was supposed to be conquered by a few hundred. The mathematics of occupation were becoming as impossible as the mathematics of battle. For the first time in his career, Zix Thak was beginning to understand that there were some things that could not be calculated, some forces that could not be predicted, and some enemies that could not be defeated by superior numbers and technology alone. The humans were teaching him that war was not just about weapons and tactics. It was about something deeper, something that his species had forgotten. In their pursuit of mathematical perfection, it was about fighting for something worth dying for. The final battle for Earth began on a Tuesday morning when the Kethran fleet entered the Sol system. Commander Zix Thak had brought every remaining ship in his command, 137 vessels that represented the last hope of completing his mission. The past 3 months of fighting had taught him that humans were unlike any enemy he had ever faced, but he believed that threatening their homeworld would break their spirit. He was wrong. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood in the command center of Luna Base, watching the tactical display as enemy ships moved toward Earth. She had been preparing for this moment since the war began, coordinating with every human ship, station, and colony in the system. What she had planned defied every rule of military engagement, but then again, humans had been breaking those rules since the war started. "Admiral," reported Commander Ryan Foster from his position aboard the destroyer Vengeance, "all civilian ships are in position. We have cargo haulers, mining vessels, passenger transports, and even some private yachts ready to join the defense." Kate nodded. The human fleet defending Earth consisted of 93 military vessels and over 400 civilian ships that had been hastily converted for combat. It was the largest human fleet ever assembled, but it was also the most desperate. "Remember," Kate said over the fleet-wide communication system, "we are not just fighting for Earth. We are fighting for every human who has ever lived, and every human who will ever be born. Make them remember this day." On the bridge of the Void Render, Commander Zix Thak studied the human formation with growing confusion. The human ships were arranged in what looked like complete chaos. Military vessels were mixed with civilian craft. Formations overlapped in ways that made no tactical sense, and some ships appeared to be moving in completely random patterns. "Sir," reported the tactical officer, "we are detecting some unusual energy signatures from the human fleet. It appears they have modified their ships extensively." Zixthak examined the sensor data. The humans had been busy during the months of fighting. Their ships now carried weapons that registered as unknown energy types. Some vessels showed power signatures that were far beyond what their original designs should have been capable of producing. "It does not matter," Zixthak said. "Begin the attack. Target their military vessels first." The Kethran fleet moved forward in perfect formation, weapons charging for the opening salvo. But as they approached firing range, something unexpected happened. The human fleet did not wait for the Kethrans to get into optimal position. Instead, they attacked immediately. The first wave of human attackers came from an unexpected direction. Captain Carlos Martinez, commanding a squadron of modified cargo ships, had been hiding behind Earth's moon. His ships had been fitted with ramming prows and loaded with every explosive device the humans could manufacture. "For Earth," Martinez shouted as his ship, the Bulldozer, accelerated toward the Kethran formation. The cargo ships moved faster than any Kethran computer had calculated they could. Dr. Pierce and her team had been busy stripping out everything unnecessary and replacing it with engines salvaged from destroyed warships. The result was ships that could barely hold together, but could accelerate like fighters. 12 cargo ships slammed into the Kethran fleet's outer formation. The explosions were spectacular, destroying both the cargo ships and several Kethran vessels. But more importantly, they disrupted the perfect geometric arrangement that the Kethrans relied on for coordinated fire. Before the Kethrans could reform their lines, the second wave of human attacks began. This time it came from civilian passenger ships that had been converted into missile platforms. Nancy Wright, a former civilian engineer, had designed a system that could launch hundreds of small missiles from ships that were never meant to carry weapons. The missile swarm overwhelmed the Kethran point defense systems. Individual missiles were not powerful enough to destroy the alien ships, but hundreds of them striking simultaneously caused significant damage to shields and armor. "Sir," reported the tactical officer, "we are taking damage from multiple vectors. The humans are not following any recognizable attack pattern." Zixthak stared at the tactical display. The human fleet was not fighting like a military force. They were fighting like a swarm of angry insects, attacking from every direction at once, with no apparent coordination. But there was coordination. Admiral Sullivan was orchestrating the entire battle from Luna Base, using communication methods that the Kethrans could not intercept. Human ships were coordinating through quantum entanglement communicators, devices that Dr. Pierce had developed using principles she had learned from studying Kethran technology. "All ships, execute Pattern Gamma," Sullivan ordered. Pattern Gamma was something that existed in no military manual. It was pure human creativity applied to space combat. Every ship in the human fleet suddenly changed course, moving in directions that seemed random, but were actually calculated to confuse Kethran. Targeting computers. The Kethran weapon systems had been designed to track ships moving in predictable patterns. When faced with hundreds of ships moving in completely unpredictable ways, the targeting computers began to malfunction. Commander Foster, aboard the Vengeance, saw his opportunity. His ship had been modified with one of Dr. Pierce's most dangerous inventions, a computer virus designed specifically to attack Kethran systems. The virus was based on human creativity patterns that Kethran computers could not process. "All ships, this is Foster," he announced. "I'm going to try something crazy. If it works, we might have a chance." If it doesn't, well, it's been an honor serving with you all. Foster's ship accelerated directly toward the Catherine flagship. The Void Render's defensive systems locked onto the approaching destroyer, but Foster had learned from months of fighting. Catherine's. He knew their weapons would target his ship's center of mass, so he had positioned all his critical systems in unexpected locations. The destroyer took multiple hits as it approached the flagship, but it kept flying. At the last moment, Foster transmitted Dr. Pierce's virus directly into the Catherine ship's communication system. The effect was immediate and devastating. The virus spread through the Catherine fleet's networked computers like wildfire. Ships that had been moving in perfect formation suddenly found themselves unable to communicate with each other. Weapon systems began firing at random targets. Navigation computers started giving contradictory orders. What is happening? Zixthak demanded as his bridge systems began displaying error messages in languages that did not exist. Sir, the tactical officer replied, our computers are processing some kind of recursive data loop. The patterns appear to be based on human creative processes that our systems cannot categorize. The virus had been designed by combining human art, music, and poetry into data patterns that Catherine computers tried to analyze but could not understand. The more the computers tried to process the data, the more confused they became. While the Catherine fleet struggled with system failures, the human fleet pressed their advantage. Ships that had been hiding throughout the solar system suddenly appeared. Mining vessels from the asteroid belt, cargo ships from the outer colonies, even tourist vessels from the Jupiter moons joined the battle. Joe Parker, the farmer who had attacked the Catherine supply depot on New Austin, was now commanding a converted grain transport called the Harvester. His ship was armed with mining lasers and agricultural chemicals that had been turned into weapons. This is for my farm, Parker said as he targeted a Catherine cruiser, and for every field they burned. The battle raged for 8 hours. Human ships were destroyed in large numbers, but they were being replaced by new vessels that seemed to appear from everywhere. Teenagers piloted racing ships loaded with explosives. Retired military officers commanded luxury yachts fitted with weapons. Even scientists from research stations joined the fight in ships that had never been designed for combat. Commander Zixthak watched his perfect fleet fall apart. The mathematics that had never failed him were meaningless against an enemy that refused to follow logical patterns. His ships were being destroyed by converted civilian vessels, piloted by people who had no formal military training. Sir, Cuthbert said quietly, perhaps we should consider retreat. For the first time in his career, Zixthak was facing the possibility of defeat, not because his enemy was stronger, but because they were something he had never encountered before. They were fighting not just with weapons, but with hope, determination, and a love for their home that made them more dangerous than any military force he had ever faced. The humans were teaching him that some things could not be calculated. Some forces could not be predicted, and some enemies could not be defeated by superior technology alone. They were teaching him that war was not about mathematics. It was about the will to keep fighting when logic said you should surrender. The war ended not with a massive explosion or a final desperate battle, but with a simple communication from Commander Zixthak to Admiral Kate Sullivan. After 18 hours of continuous fighting above Earth, the Catherine fleet had been reduced to 47 ships, and those that remained were badly damaged. Admiral Sullivan, Zixthak said over the communication channel, I request permission to discuss terms of withdrawal. Kate Sullivan looked around the command center at Luna Base. The walls were scarred from impacts. Half the screens were dark, and the air smelled of smoke and burnt electronics. But her people were still fighting, still refusing to give up. You want to surrender? She asked. I want to understand, Zixthak replied. We have fought 47 species across the galaxy. We have never lost a war. We have never even come close to losing a war. But your species has defeated us using cargo ships and farming equipment. I need to know how this is possible. 2 hours later, Zig-Zag found himself aboard the human command station, sitting across from Admiral Sullivan in a room that looked like it had been hit by several explosions. The Admiral was a woman in her 50s with gray hair and tired eyes, but she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had just won an impossible victory. Your ships are more advanced than ours, Sullivan said. Your weapons are more powerful. Your computers are faster. By every measure that matters in warfare, you should have won easily. That is what our calculations predicted, Zig-Zag agreed, but we did not win. We lost. How? Sullivan smiled, and it was not the smile of someone celebrating victory. It was the smile of someone who had learned something important about life and death. You fought a war, she said. We fought for survival. There is a difference. Over the next several hours, Admiral Sullivan explained concepts that Zig-Zag had never encountered in all his years of military service. She talked about how humans fought not just with weapons, but with love for their families, their homes, and their freedom. She explained how civilian farmers and teachers and engineers had become warriors because they had something worth dying for. When Captain Martinez crashed his cargo ship into your formation, Sullivan said, he was not following some tactical doctrine. He was thinking about his daughter back on Earth and how he would do anything to keep her safe. That kind of motivation cannot be calculated. Dr. Helen Pierce joined the conversation, bringing with her samples of the weapons and technology that humans had developed during the war. She showed Zig-Zag how human creativity had turned Catherine advantages into weaknesses. Your ships are perfectly designed, Dr. Pierce explained. Every system is optimized for maximum efficiency, but that perfection made them predictable. Once we understood how your technology worked, we could find ways to break it. She showed him the computer virus that had crippled the Catherine fleet. This is not just code, she said. This is human poetry, human music, human art translated into data patterns. Your computers tried to analyze it logically, but creativity cannot be analyzed. It can only be experienced. Commander Foster, who had survived the virus attack despite his ship being heavily damaged, explained the human approach to space combat. We did not try to fight you the way you expected to be fought, he said. We fought you the way humans fight, with improvisation and desperation, and a willingness to try anything that might work. Zig-Zag listened to all of this with growing understanding. The Catherine Empire had spent centuries perfecting the science of war, but they had forgotten its purpose. They conquered worlds because they were good at it, not because they had any reason to conquer them. We fight because we must, Zig-Zag said slowly. You fight because you choose to. That is the difference. No, Admiral Sullivan replied. The difference is that we know what we are fighting for. You fight to expand your empire. We fight to protect our families. You fight because it is your job. We fight because it is our life. 3 days later, a Catherine fleet departed human space. They left behind their dead, their damaged equipment, and their reputation for invincibility. But they took with them something more valuable than any military victory. They took knowledge. Zig-Zag returned to the Catherine Empire as a changed individual. He reported to the High Command that humans were not just another primitive species to be conquered. They were something new, something that challenged everything the Catherines believed about warfare and civilization. Recommend immediate cessation of all military operations against human colonies, Zig-Zag wrote in his final report. Human combat effectiveness increases exponentially when defending their homeworlds. Suggest peaceful contact and trade negotiations instead of military conquest. The High Command was not pleased with this recommendation. They had never failed to conquer a species before, and they did not want to start now. But the numbers were clear. The Kethran Empire had lost over half. Its fleet tried to conquer 12 human worlds. The cost of victory, if it was even possible, would be higher than any prize could justify. Years passed. The Kethran Empire turned its attention to other parts of the galaxy, avoiding human space entirely. Other alien species heard rumors about the humans who had defeated the invincible Kethrans, and most decided that peaceful contact was preferable to military confrontation. Admiral Sullivan, now retired, spent her time training the next generation of human space officers. She taught them that their greatest weapon was not any piece of technology, but their humanity itself. Remember, she would tell her students, we did not win because we were stronger or smarter or better equipped. We won because we knew what we were fighting for. We fought for our homes, our families, our freedom. We fought because we chose to fight, not because we had to. Commander Foster, now an admiral himself, established the Human Defense Academy on Luna Base. The academy taught not just military tactics, but the philosophy behind human warfare. Students learned that every battle was personal, that every victory came at a cost, and that the best way to win a war was to know what you were willing to die for. Dr. Pierce continued her research, but now she focused on using her discoveries to help humanity explore the galaxy peacefully. She had learned that human creativity could be used to build as well as destroy, to heal as well as harm. Meanwhile, in a quiet office on the Kethran homeworld, Zixthak worked as an advisor to the Imperial Military Academy. When young Kethran officers asked him about the human war, he would tell them about the species that had taught him the most important lesson of his career. I thought I knew war, he would say. I thought war was about superior numbers and advanced technology and perfect tactical coordination. But the humans showed me that war is about something much deeper. It is about fighting for something you love more than your own life. And that, he would conclude, is why we could never defeat them. Because they were not just fighting a war. They were fighting for everything that made them human. The story of the human war became legend throughout the galaxy. When other species considered challenging humanity, they would remember the Kethran fleet that had entered human space with 200 ships and left with less than 50. They would remember that humans did not just fight wars. They fought for their survival, their freedom, and their right to exist in a universe that often seemed determined to destroy them. And they would remember that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is not the one with the biggest weapons or the most advanced technology. Sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one who refuses to surrender, who fights with creativity and determination and love, and who believes that some things are worth dying for. That enemy, they learned, was humanity itself.